Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I feel like I'm about to go in for my annual review at work. I'm a little nervous. I feel like I had a pretty good year, but you're always a little nervous. Am I going to get my raise this year? I don't know. We'll see how my terrible boss thinks I did.
Well, you want that 3% pretty bad, don't you? Well, we'll see.
COLA. Cola, yay. Yay for inflation. It makes me feel like a success.
There you go. Perfect. Yes, Tom, the cost of living has risen. The cost of thriving, however, has declined. And so I have some bad news for you. We are going back and revisiting our bold spring predictions. This show we did probably at the end of February, beginning of March. And as Tom mentioned on the previous show, we don't ever go back and look at predictions because it doesn't help our ego to do so.
And we mentioned this on Tuesday's show. Have I gone back since Tuesday's show and looked? Friends, I have not. This is still going to be an exciting mystery to me.
Yeah, and I thought that would be the best for the show anyway. I mean, Tom has no recollection of anything that he predicted. And so the fun part is I could just make these up. I could be like, Tom, you said that Sam Wiglu's would be in the top 4, and I don't think that happened. But of course, that's a little extreme. You would have said like maybe top 7.
Did you see his catch at the end of the spring game?
Fantastic.
I don't know. I think that may be too soon to say.
Yeah, the awareness to reach back over there. But so let's go through these, Tom, because there are like 12 or so, and I have more than you because I prepared more, as is usually the case of this show. I prepare more than is necessary, and so if I have more wrong, that's the reason why.
If you have more right, that's also the reason why.
No, it just means I was right.
Okay.
So let's start. We could start, Tom, here. I've got all of these written down. We'll go in the order that they were made, starting with you. You said, prepare yourself. You said TreVeyon Henderson running with the ones at some point, some way by the end of the spring. That was one of your predictions. And yeah, that happened because they all ran with the ones. So it's kind of a cowardly bold prediction, but still true. And in our show, we count that.
We do count that. And you know what? I also looked at him and it was like, I think he has shown enough that he could very well be the number one back at some point this fall, not just running with the one sometimes, but actually the number one back. I mean, you go back and watch that. We did the show where we went back and watched, and I didn't talk about him, but there were a couple where it's like he gets the ball and he just he takes off. It is explosive. And in a game where no one can run the ball, he had a couple that were like, okay, there's something there. And you can see it in the passing game. He's a dynamic player. It is going to be very hard to keep him off the field this fall.
Yeah, it's too bad we didn't get to see him actually running the ball. It's kind of like watching Steph Curry shoot with with a lid on the rim. It's like, well, it's not exactly how things are supposed to go. But yeah, he definitely ran some with the one, so we'll give you credit on that one. And going back, I've had to listen to this show for some reason recently, and I actually have him starting by November. I said that before, and it's like, wow, I forgot I said that, but if it comes true, then I'm going to remember I did.
I don't know if that's even bold anymore. I think starting by September might be well within the realm of possibility.
That would be bold. November would be like, yeah, I could see that. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
But again, he's just a freshman. Let's give him a chance here, Tom. Next, oh no, next for me. Master Teague receives the most accolades of anybody at running back this spring. That didn't happen, Tom. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to show yourself a little grace, he didn't play in the spring game. He was just a little dinged up, so he didn't play in the spring game. So if you want to show yourself a little grace, you can grade that incomplete. But I don't think that was necessarily reflective of the realities on the ground during the course of the spring. So
I also don't know that I expected it to reflect the actual reality. I just thought the coaches were going to gas him up because everybody else is getting talked about. So I thought that he would do everything that they asked him to do, and they would be very praiseworthy of it. Although we talked to Tony Alford pretty early in spring, so it was hard to get anything from him at that point because Tom, it's too early.
It is too early. Frankly, it's still too early, if you ask me. Yeah, that was, I believe the running backs were the single first position group we talked to. So that was like the Tuesday after they started practice on the previous Friday. So you don't know what to make of it, but he certainly wasn't the guy that came out of the spring with the most buzz. So, if you want to be charitable, you can give yourself an incomplete. If you want to be accurate, you can give yourself an incomplete or an incorrect. But
I was a victim of circumstance in this point. And even, take away TreVeyon Henderson, who probably came out with the most buzz just because. Who would be the next guy? Mayan Williams?
Probably Mayan Williams. And, there's an argument for Steel Chambers because it sounds like Steel Chambers has rectified his issues with hanging onto the ball. I think there's a lot of excitement around him. Marcus Crowley looked pretty decent. I mean, I don't know that TreVeyon Henderson probably is the actual answer here for the guy with the most buzz, but that may just be that he is the newest, shiniest object in the room because he's a true freshman and the 5-star guy and all of that. So, I mean, Master Teague, I think, is probably about the 4th or 5th buzziest guy in that room right now. But yeah, he's not at the top of the list. That's for sure.
All right. So, I was wrong about that one. I'm also probably wrong about this one because I'm up next again for some reason. Julian Fleming takes a jump into the top 4 of the receivers. But I also said Jackson Smith and Jigba would be number 3. So if we want to just talk about Smith and Jigba, but of course it was actually the Julian Fleming thing. And again, Tom, I'm a victim of circumstance. He was injured. I didn't know that going in. These are bold predictions. They're not predictions about injuries.
So what I'm hearing is every time you talk about someone, they get hurt. So maybe you should, I'm not sure you should continue hosting this podcast.
Tom, let me talk about you for a second.
Ow!
So, I mean, again, and as I said on the last show, at the end of the last show, like, let's not forget about Julian Fleming. And maybe it's because I remembered, hey, I've made a bold prediction about him. And let's all just try to keep him in mind. That way, maybe my prediction can eventually, it's a time release prediction. It's not something, it's something that you get over time. You don't want it all in one lump sum. This is an annuity.
I'm picturing the ad of the need cash now guy who drives the bus. Yes, that's
my bold prediction. I want it now.
That's you driving the bus. You don't want your bold predictions spread out over time. Get them all right now. And yeah, I mean, he's someone who, if you want to go off of what we heard from Brian Hartline, he's probably right at the top of the pile. If you want to go based on what we saw, he's not, because he was hurt and he didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. He was out there running routes, I think, for Justin Fields during one of his pro day things, right? But he wasn't out there for the spring game. We saw him, I think, limited in one of the practices we got to see. But, if you're having a surgery to clean up some old medical issues, like, yeah, okay, there may be a reason you're not there. And maybe once he's back to fully healthy and able to be back in the running in the fall, maybe he does end up there. So maybe this is a time release thing where it ultimately is right, but it's not right now.
Well, let's just hold off on saying who's right and who's wrong, because I like my odds here. Eventually, when there's only 4 receivers left. I
like the fact that you're like, let's do a show on who is right and who is wrong, and it's like, no, let's not do that right now. It's like, well, we've already hit record. I don't know what to tell you unless you have another show. Okay. Unless you have another show that we need to do.
All right. Well, here's one for you, Tom. This is specifically about the spring game.
Mm-hmm.
There will be 3 or more passing plays of 40 or more yards in the spring game, and you, sir, were way out because I think there's only one.
It was the very first one, right? It was the Kyle McCord to, yeah.
Now, Chris Olave's wasn't 40 yards, I don't believe, was it? Even so, that's only 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I don't. Let's not like just belabor the point that you were wrong. We don't need to do that. That you got your prediction wrong. I mean, we don't need to keep talking about how you're wrong about it. But why were you wrong about it?
I think one of my big issues was I wasn't planning on them having only half of a game, basically. So two 10-minute quarters, if you prorate that out, 2 10-minute quarters, prorate that over a 60-minute game, boom, 3. And then if Chris Olave did it, then I was really shy, and it was actually 6 if you prorate it. So
you're wrong.
So I think you marked that correct then, because if we're really only grading on 20 minutes of football,
well, that's true.
In a normal spring game, multiply it times 3, boom, correct.
But why aren't you counting the second half?
Well, I mean, spiritually, there wasn't a clock running. So was it really a game?
That's not the football I grew up on.
Rewatching, the Big Ten Network guy said, now it's more of a controlled scrimmage. It's like, well, it's not a game. Hey, that's not. So,
well, and really,
it's like Major League Baseball last year or college football last year. It's like you look at the stats, and they said on the broadcast, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, well, they had 700 yards, but you got to remember that was only in a condensed season. So you prorate that over a full season, boom, those are huge numbers. Same thing. 1 touchdown in 20 minutes a game. You prorate that over a 60-minute game. How many is it?
Oh, I wasn't listening. But the stats also counted in the second half.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a controlled scrimmage, so really they shouldn't have counted them. Is what I think my big takeaway is.
Okay, and it was interesting because Big Ten Network on YouTube did split them up into 2 different videos.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they're all about monetization, so why wouldn't they? So we'll count that one as right. Sure. Now,
even though it was wrong.
Yeah, we're lenient here. It's Common Core math. My next one, and this is actually, I think, right and technically wrong. Ryan Watts leaves spring as the corner opposite Seven Banks. Now, Seven Banks didn't finish spring, so technically the corner opposite him right now is Cameron Brown, because they were both
on the opposite benches. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, but I think Ryan Watts finished strong enough to where people remember him. Legend Cavazos didn't play in the spring game. DeMario McCall moved ahead of Tyreek Johnson in the span of a week. So I don't care if it's by default. I think it's also by his play, and I'm taking credit. I'm going to call this one a win for me.
I'll give that one to you. He had the most memorable play for a defensive back in the spring game, and
history,
at least in the spring game. And yes, there's no Seven Banks, there's no Cam Brown, there was no Legend Cavazos, so the competition gets pretty thin pretty quickly. But and again, they've got 2 more guys who are coming in this summer who are probably the 2 corners who are most likely to jump into that starting rotation, or at least the rotation or playing time this fall. So it's like, okay, you take the 5 probably leading candidates out of the running here, and then I think he's pretty clearly the answer. So we'll give you credit there. That's fine.
Anyway, I can get it. I don't care if it doesn't matter. It's a yes. So I think we're all betting 1,000 here so far. Next one for you, Tom. Jack Sawyer works his way into the starting defensive end rotation by the end of spring. And if anybody saw the spring game, I don't know, you may not have noticed him. He was number 33, played a little bit. I don't recall him doing anything of note. So, Tom, Jack Sawyer works his way into the starting defensive end rotation by the end of spring. Yeah, Ohio State likes to rotate their defensive ends. I don't know that he did anything in this spring to get in there.
I think my big question right now is, can I mark this as 2 correct? Because I was so correct. I was so right about this. And you go back and it's like, there's all sorts of reasons why this shouldn't have happened. He didn't play last year because he opted out for his high school senior season. The season before that, he basically played quarterback on his high school team. He really didn't play much on the defensive side of the ball because their quarterback got hurt and they needed someone. And he just kind of, okay, well, because I am the greatest athlete in the state of Ohio, I can just do everything. It's like, oh, you'd like me to throw a football 60 yards? That's fine. I can do that. No problem. Can't everyone do that? Like, no, in fact, they cannot. So he had basically 2 years in a row of not playing defensive end. And then he walks onto campus at Ohio State and just has, they gave him credit for 3 sacks. That was probably low. You probably could have been 4 or 5. If you really wanted to be charitable, he could have had 6 because there was one where he pushed a guy into the quarterback, even though that seems like more correct than anything we've ever said on this podcast before.
That might be the most correct thing you've ever said.
Only correct thing I've ever said. That's the key. The only correct thing I've ever said.
Yeah, but now you're 1 in a row. So don't blow the streak right now. They rotated 5 last year. There's no reason they're not going to do the same. And at this point, just imagine the the irateness, if that's a word, the anger from Ohio State fans.
Anger is a word.
Yes, it certainly is. If he's not like playing, and it's just, even if it's 20 snaps, we're like, yeah, well, he's not quite ready. Maybe next week we'll get him in there. And people are like, what's the point of recruiting them if you're not even going to play them? All he does is get sacks. We've seen it live with our own eyes, and we know the spring game is the ultimate form of evidence ever.
And, you can't read too much into the spring game in and of itself. But when the spring game, this is like the worst. This is like everyone online. Like, only the things that I believed before are proven by the things that I see. But like, when you're hearing constantly from our high school scouts, like, hey, this guy is like amazing. This guy's been the best player in the state of Ohio since he was a sophomore, like better than Paris Johnson, better than Zach Harrison. He's a sophomore. And then you see that. And then he, continues to play at his extremely high level. And then all the practice reports you're hearing are, hey, this guy's incredible. And then he loses his black stripe. And then you see that in the spring game. It's like, okay, like at some point when all of the data is pointing in the same exact direction, like, okay, this means something. This is not, everyone, Bam Childers is always the go-to spring game, flash. Bam Childers, Torian Washington. You didn't generally have the whole spring where you're hearing, you wait till you see Torian Washington. It was just like, hey, this guy had a really good day during the spring game. That's a lot easier to dismiss than, hey, this guy who you've been hearing for like 4 years is the most incredible player people have ever seen. Like, yes, he continues to look like the most incredible player people have ever seen. So, that probably means something at that point.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole bunch of talk about like Antonio Henton. Like, he makes a good play in the spring, but it wasn't a month's worth of wait till you see this guy. And then afterwards it was a month worth of did you see that guy? But anyway, that's many years ago. That's like 15 years ago at this point. 14, whatever. Now this is me back on the defensive line. I'm going to give myself credit, but it probably shouldn't. I'll just go ahead and say that right now.
Oh, there we go. We have our episode title.
Yeah. In fact, we don't even need to discuss it. We can move on to your next one now. But mine is Ty Hamilton leaves spring as an or at nose tackle with Antoine Jackson. Now, there is no way to say that I'm wrong because there is no official depth chart that Ohio State will put out. And Larry Johnson isn't going to do that. And we know that Ohio State will rotate 3 nose tackles. They've done it for years with Devon Hamilton and BB Landers and Tommy Togiai, and they've done it last year with Tommy Togiai and Antoine Jackson and Jerron Cage. So I think even if Ty Hamilton and Antoine Jackson and Jerron Cage are your 3 nose tackles, I think they're all fairly going to play this year. I don't know how much time they will see, though, because also we know everybody's working at nose tackle, including Teron Vincent, and we might see Haskell Garrett there, and those 2 might be your starting defensive tackles. So I'm going to give myself credit because I'm going to put together a depth chart that has an or there. And I didn't say my exact quote is Ty Hamilton leaves spring as an or at nose tackle with Antoine Jackson. I didn't say who's going to be putting the depth chart together. So I will be putting one together that has him as an or. And so I don't see any way I'm wrong about that as long as I actually do it and don't forget to put the or when I do the defensive tackle spring recap in like a week or so.
I'm wondering how you found time to go to law school between this time that we did this first show and now.
I listened to your show.
That was good. That was smart. Yeah, there we go. We have Dan Lust on to talk about sports law, and boom, Tony's got a degree. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's not completely indefensible, which is the kindest possible way for me to frame this. Like, I think if you're just looking purely at the, like, even if you're just setting Teron Vincent aside, I think that's probably Antoine Jackson. If there's an or, who's ahead? Is it Ty Hamilton or Jerron Cage? Who's second right now?
They're an or.
Yeah, I mean, it might be
Jerron Cage.
It might be Antoine Jackson, and then Jerron Cage or Ty Hamilton. It might be an or for the second spot. I don't think he's really for the first spot, but as you said, like, we can't We can't get a depth chart. Maybe this will be what causes someone inside the Woody to leak us a depth chart just to prove you wrong. Hey, listen, I know we're not supposed to let this out. You just all we're going to get leaked is just the depth chart for that one position. I can't tell you how I know this, but I know this. This we got to have Nevada call in a favor. That's how we do this. Find out for sure.
Tweet it out from the official account just randomly, and people will be like, "What's this about?"
Listen, Nevada, I've never asked you for anything before. I need you to give me the exact depth chart at 3 Tech or at nose this year.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Please don't ask why.
Oh, this one can't be answered yet, Tom. And here you go. It's you. And you said more than 5 players will enter the transfer portal during or after spring. Okay. One is in there so far with Max Ray.
Mm-hmm.
So that leaves 4 more. How you feeling?
Well, considering that I didn't put a time frame on it, I just said during or after spring.
Gosh dang it.
I have from now until the heat death of the universe. So I'm feeling pretty darn good about it. Now look who's a lawyer.
Yeah, we have 2 lawyers on this show. I mean, that's pretty good.
I think 5 is a lot, but I don't think it's an unreasonable number. You've got one, Max Ray, the offensive lineman. There's so much depth in so many different spots, and these are all guys who came in really highly touted. You could go through, you could go through every position group on the team and go, yeah, you could see someone transferring from there. You could see a running back transferring. You could see a wide receiver transferring. You could see another offensive lineman transferring. You could see a defensive lineman transferring. Like you could see a linebacker transfer. You can go through and you can, I think you could probably mentally add a name to some of these, but I think 5 is pretty reasonable because I mean, how many guys does Michigan have in the transfer portal right now? It seems like 15, right? I mean,
I think it's more than they don't.
Yeah, Ohio State is, I think, culturally pretty good at getting guys to stick around, and you have, before the spring, I probably would have, we don't say names on when we're putting names on this, but before the spring, I would have probably had DeMario McCall on that list. Now I would not have DeMario McCall on that list because it's like maybe he has found his home now. So, but there's, even with a culture of guys generally sticking around, 5 is actually a pretty low number when you think about it compared to a lot of other programs right now. So I think I'm still feeling pretty good about that one.
Especially when you're just talking, you only need 4 now, and 4 after spring is pretty standard. That's, I mean, you almost prepare for that. They do prepare for that. And I wouldn't, I could give you 7 or 8 names where you'd be like, yeah, I believe that. And of course we won't, but here's a name for you, Tom. Again, we'll give you credit later on, maybe, probably. We certainly won't remember to do it. I won't. I'm not going to make it a point when they hit that 5 mark to be like, hey, Tom, let's celebrate. You got this one right. No, I mean, that's never been what the show is about. And never, as far as I'm doing it, it never will be. And my next one, and I went too far on this one, but it's also correct in a sense. And I don't know why I went this far, other than I was probably just joking. Cade Stover ends up being a star of the offense and leaves no doubt about the second tight end. The latter portion of that is correct. The former portion is certainly an exaggeration. But again, this is the year of the tight ends. And what we saw from him was very good, I thought, in the spring game. Run blocking, did some pass blocking, and certainly the one-handed catch. That's just tremendous natural athleticism, hand-eye coordination. Did he leave no doubt that he is the second tight end, though, Tom, in your mind?
I think you got to have Joe Royer in that conversation right now, don't you? I mean,
I don't.
Well, and the other question there is G. Scott. Like, what is G. Scott? Because we didn't get to see G. Scott in the spring game, and we didn't get to see him much in practice this spring. I don't think G. Scott is a second tight end right now, just because I don't know how much. We saw him like off to the side during one of the practices we got to watch the week before the game. He didn't play in the game, so you sort of assume he probably didn't practice that whole last week. In a position change, he's, so let's say he's had 8 practices maybe at tight end. He's probably not the second tight end now. Does that mean he's not the second tight end in the fall? No, of course not. He could very well be the second tight end in the fall. But to me, just based on the guys we saw in the spring game, it's probably either Joe Royer or Cade Stover. I guess you'd probably give Cade Stover the edge, I guess. I mean, Joe Royer had a touchdown. Joe Royer was out there quite a bit. I think they are pretty high on Joe Royer. So I don't know if there's no doubt. Since we're having this conversation, there's probably some doubt. There's some question mark there. So, I think Cade Stover probably, is at least that's probably an or. I mean, you want to go back to your Ty Hamilton thing, Jeremy Ruckert, Cade Stover, or Joe Royer. That I think is totally reasonable. Now, Cade Stover was probably the second tight end more likely than not going into spring. And now there's an or. So that would seem to indicate some doubt there to me. But, hey, I mean, you're the one grading the papers here. So you can.
Yeah. I have no doubt, Tom. You just need to be more confident.
It's always a me problem, isn't it?
Yes. And G Scott, I think he's a flex tight end. So he's his own thing where he can't be on the line of scrimmage, I don't believe, this year. So he's going to be a package guy, and there's nothing wrong with that, and can certainly use him in that way and make things happen. It's everybody else can be on the line, which then that means he can play with anybody else as a second tight end. But I think we both agree then that Cade Stover is clearly the number 2 tight end.
What was the first part? Star of the spring?
It ends up being a star of the offense. Now, figurative star, not a literal star, like a figurative, like, oh, everybody likes him. He's got a great personality, lights up the room type of thing.
He almost had one catch. He
lights up the room.
He didn't catch a pass. Maybe he really is an Ohio State tight end.
See, told you. And he's the second tight end. Like, oh, your guys, they caught passes. Sam Hart catches a pass. Joe Royer catches a pass. That don't mean nothing in the spring.
That's not how we do things around here, friends. No.
The actual second tight end does not get a catch. So I think now we both agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Absolutely.
Oh, Tom, here's one. This is one of yours. And it was a bold prediction that really shouldn't have been, and I gave you grief for it at the time. The Jesse Mirko era is going to be a golden age for terrible Australian accents on this show. Now, that is a correct prediction, but it's certainly not bold.
Right, mate. He may have shanked one on Saturday, but you've played Knifey Spoony before, mate. One thing I learned recently was that throw another shrimp on the Barbie is not, in fact, a thing that people in Australia say. That is actually just something that I believe Outback Steakhouse invented for an advertising campaign. So I feel I have misled everyone by saying throw another shrimp on the Barbie. That's not. I think my Australian accent is getting worse. I might mark that incorrect because I feel like I'm losing my Australian accent once I start getting away from but you say Dundee lines.
You do say it's going to be a golden age for terrible Australian accents.
Oh, then correct. 2 thumbs up.
Also, while we're correcting stereotypes about Australia, it's not always like the Mad Max stuff. Like sometimes, yes, it's very Mad Maxy there. There is like gasoline trucks that are being hit. It's a barren wasteland. But it's not always like that. Like you get into Sydney, it's like a city. You get outside of Sydney, it's Mad Max. But you just have to, where you're going. My last one, Tom, the last one for the show. Are you ready? Craig Young will leave spring as one of the big names to know on defense. Praise me.
It's your least bad prediction yet. No, that's a good one. That I think is absolutely fair. I think he's, we did the show on Tuesday and talked about some of the things we noticed, and I think both of us had a takeaway about Craig Young had a really nice day, and it sure seems like the bullet is going to be probably that base defense, and it sure seems like Craig Young is probably minimally, the splitting time starter there with Ronnie Hickman right now, depending on whether it's more of a running situation or passing situation, at least. So yeah, I will give you full credit for that one.
And the thing is, we did this before we talked to any of the coaches. This was just all intuition. I'd say knowledge, intelligence, intellect, smarts, preparation, understanding, knowledge, intellect. That allowed me to make this correct prediction.
I think the most impressive thing there is I figured out the Jesse Mirko accent thing even before we talked to Parker Fleming. So I think I'm probably the ultimate winner here, but I mean, you did okay too.
While we did go back and go through who was wrong and who was right, we did not keep score.
So we're gonna just put this as an or on the scoreboard as well. Who won, Tom or Tony?
Yes, 1R. Thank you very much. So that'll do it, Tom. Anything else from any of this? Anything you wish you would have said?
I'm just already thinking, like, man, if we're grading our past bold prediction shows now, that can only mean one thing. We need to do another bold prediction show like a week or two from now, like bold predictions for the summer heading into fall camp, and then we can do this again. Because we are not exactly in the most content rich time in the editorial calendar now during the long break between spring football and it's usually about 100 days between the end of spring football and when Big Ten Media Days typically is scheduled around July 20 something, 23rd, 24th, something like that. So yeah, we are not in the most content rich section of the editorial calendar, but because of all those upcoming transfers, there's going to be a lot to talk about. So maybe we'll be okay.
Yeah, it just requires work, and we're not afraid of that. We're not afraid of working for the podcast.
There's a correct correction for you.
We can revisit that one and see if we did see how right we were about that one. But that will do it for this show, and it'll do it for this week. And we thank you for listening. As always, remind you to check out BuckeyeScoop.com for all kinds of fantastic content. Tom, who you got on the morning scoop tomorrow?
Well, that's. I guess I probably have to have Tony Gerdeman on. I don't have an answer, but if I just tell Tony Gerdeman he has to do it, then that's fine. He's going to do it. So, yeah, I have quite an impressive list of people I'm planning to have on soon. I have not figured out who I'm having on for tomorrow's show yet, but we'll get there.
All right,
we're there every morning, so we'll figure it out. I haven't had to talk to myself yet, but again, we're heading into the off season.
Yes, we will see. All right, then that will do it. Again, just a reminder, if you're not yet a member at BuckeyeScoop.com, I would recommend it. It's incredibly fun there, incredibly informative, and there's some big plans coming up for later this month as well. So check that out, youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop for all of the podcasts, all kinds of videos there as well, and subscribe there, and you'll be reminded anytime this show pops up or any of our other shows. So just a couple of recommendations for you, make your life better and to help you out. And that'll do it. And we will talk to you guys next week.